Hey guys, so today we are answering a subscriber question, and the question in question is, Fredrik, how do you manage stakeholders? So let's get into it. Well, this is a very broad question because, right, stakeholders, who are we talking about? Because the sort of stakeholders that you have, I mean, they can vary from all kinds of people. It can be project owners to to team leads, to CEOs, to business people, to sales, to customers. It can be all kinds of people, right? And the only thing that I can really give you here that might be fairly universal is the one thing that I realized that a little bit later than I probably should, but still probably a little bit earlier than some, which, feels pretty good. And the thing that I realized is the importance of, having a fairly high level of empathy. Well, not necessarily empathy, but insight, and having I'm not going to say business mindset, but having fairly strong soft skills. I will give you a small story that happened just the other day with my junior coworker who I'm training right now. Now, she is a little bit of she's extremely intelligent and has a lot of potential, but she is a little bit on the shy side, a little bit on the introvert side. And after working with me for some time, and we manage all these different stakeholders, she came up to me and she said, Fredrik, it's kind of funny because I started working as a programmer because I hoped that I could make some money without having to talk to a lot of people. And I kind of giggled and I said, yeah, I can understand. There's quite a few people there who think that that's the way it works. And she says, but that's not how it is at all. I mean, after working here with you for a while, and I have to talk to everybody all the time and manage expectations, and I have to ask questions and make sure that everybody knows what's going to happen. And I say, yeah, that's the one truth that you should take away from your time here with me and with the others that you're helping out here, is that the most fundamental truth of software engineering is that the biggest challenge is very rarely that something cannot be technically done. It is very often very simple to technically solve a problem, like with code, but it's very hard to figure out what you actually should be building. That's the trickiest part, and that has to do quite a lot with your ability to not only talk to people, but to understand the business, understand the person, and understand basically a bigger picture. You see, and this is what I told her, just earlier we had this discussion with the support staff, right? And she said, yeah, the support staff, they wanted us to have to add some type of validation code to our support process, basically to give users the ability to validate themselves with a code of some sort. And I said, yeah, that's exactly what they wanted. But as we discussed with them, they started talking about all kinds of other stuff as well. They talked about, all right, but if we can search for the code, how will we know if the user is really the user? I mean, our ticketing system hasn't the ability to really keep these codes around. And I said, and we told them basically, yeah, that's true, but the feature that we are delivering to you has to do with the validation code. This sounds like a separate issue. Yeah, but it would be so nice if we really could do this. And after a while of talking, we realized that they had a need for additional features. And they kept us in that meeting room. I told her, I guess, as you probably noticed, they kept us around for quite a while, even though all we were there to do was basically to set the scope for that code and how to make that code happen. But after an hour of them just talking amongst themselves, I finally just kind of said to them that, well, it seems that we have dished out, we kind of set the expectations here for this feature, but it seems to me that now you have all these unknowns within your process. You don't really seem to be in a state where you can tell us exactly what it is that you want. So maybe if you have an internal discussion about your own processes and you come back to us, and then we can set the expectations again and basically map out what the scope of this story actually is. And they kind of went, yeah, finally, yeah, absolutely, we will do that and we'll come back to you. And then we just went off, and as I told my coworker, This ended with us not doing anything. And she went, yeah, that was kind of a waste of time. No, it wasn't a waste of time. Because if they had just given us the story, in other words, if we had just taken in the feature request and they said, all right, we need this support, like this identification code. And we had just taken that like as it was, sat down and started working on that, delivered it, it would not have changed anything. We would have sat down, most likely invested several days, if not more, into building a feature that they don't even need. And we saved the company quite a few hours by sitting down for 1 hour, really listening to the stakeholders and understanding their workflow, giving us ourselves a really good picture of how they work and what their needs are, and then basically pointing out a flaw within their own reasoning. In other words, we basically told them that it doesn't seem that you're really aligned on what it is that you actually want. And that's exactly what we should do. And that's the best tip I can give you guys when it comes to handling stakeholders. Most of the time, you think that your ability to write code is the most important thing. And that is true to a point. But it's not the first step in delivering value to a customer or a company. The first step is to understand what it is that you actually need to build. Because trust me, you are the expert and you know what is possible to build, but your customer is not an expert. In other words, it's very likely that they don't really have a clear picture of what they want, and it is your responsibility if you want to be able to work in an efficient manner. I'm not saying that it should be your responsibility, but you have to own it. You kind of have to take ownership of it, and this is why the industry more and more is requiring higher levels of soft skills from their developers, because they have realized that the problem when it comes to delivering on expectations within IT, like, it just isn't an efficient way of working the way we used to, where the coders they don't give a fuck about the business or anything apart from what's stated in the expectations. And if you have people who are like code monkeys who only care about, oh, this is what the story tells me to do and that's exactly what I'm going to do, I'm not going to ask any questions, I'm not going to try to figure out how well this is going to work. All that's going to happen is that you're going to interpret the words on paper that's stated in the traditional waterfall way of working, try to build the thing that is on paper, and the customer isn't going to be happy. And we can complain about it, we can think it sucks that we need to do all this extra work and so forth, but that is no different from how the service industry works, where you have people who need to use people with a high EQ basically trying to help out a customer, who might not even sometimes be all that nice to them, and help them figure out what it is that they actually want. And that is the best thing I can give you for when it comes to managing stakeholders. You need to understand their world. You need to understand how they think, what's important to them. You need to understand what likely is going to happen in the future, and having this bigger picture of your company and your business and your customers, all of this stuff. I'm not saying that you should be a jack of all trades, but what I'm saying is that you having a high EQ, or having the ability to figure out what people actually need and what's feasible to build, or helping people or guiding them, if you will, to a solution that will work for them, is going to save you so much hassle when it comes to coding. Because what you don't want is to sit down and without really going through things properly, start working on something, build something, and probably present it, and then the customer just says, this isn't what I expected. And then you go, but this is what you said that you wanted. No, I meant this, and I meant this, and this should be that, and that should be that. And you can be, as I said, you can be as frustrated as you want. The customer won't care. Like, from their perspective, you did a bad job. It doesn't matter. Like, if you're a freelancer, if you're running your own business, this is one of the hardest fucking things that you can imagine, especially if you haven't gotten paid up front. Because if you're a freelancer and the customer isn't happy, they might not even pay you. So you need to have a strategy for doing that, and be very sure that you know what it is that you're supposed to be building, and that your customer has signed off, or ideally paid you, or signed a contract on this is the exact thing that you want. Because trust me, unhappy customers in IT come mostly from the fact that the developers have started working without having a really clear picture of, almost painfully clear picture of what is required of them. So what I want you to take away from this is that take a page from my coworker's book and realize that your primary function may be to write code, writing good, efficient code. But in order for you to be able to do that, the first step is always to understand exactly the needs of the person that you're going to write that code for. Because that's basically what your job is. Your job is to understand another person's problem, a stakeholder problem, understand what, like in the bigger picture of things, what they actually need, and convert that desire into a software solution. And sometimes, like in the story that I gave you, you might actually end up not writing a single line of code, simply because you sat down and took the time to really understand what it is that the stakeholder is asking for, asking the right questions of that stakeholder, and then finally they realize that, wow, we don't really know what it is that we want. And that's actually the best thing for you. If you can solve a problem by simply asking the right questions up front, you're going to save your company tons of money, and you're going to save yourself a lot of frustration when where you would have built something that would have still ended up being the wrong thing. Hopefully this makes sense to you. Have a great day.